the 13th of February 2023, the small, vibrant coastal community of Muriwai Beach, northwest of Auckland, New Zealand, was ripped apart by Cyclone Gabrielle. This podcast captures what happened on the night and in the days, months and years that followed. Join me, Mandy Jakic, as I speak to fellow Muriwai locals, volunteers and those involved in the emergency and recovery effort. Hear about their experiences of loss and upheaval, the impact on their lives, and the community-led initiatives that helped Muriwai find a way forward. Welcome to Precipice. In this episode, I speak with Kate Ward, the Surf Club Facility Manager and the Administrator of the Muriwai Volunteer Lifeguard Service and the Muriwai Lifeguard Services Amenity Trust. Kate is a resident of Waimauku, which is 8 k's from Muriwai. Kate talks about the role of the surf club in Muriwai, some of the problems experienced at the surf club on the night of the cyclone, and in the weeks following.
The ground was saturated and there was nowhere for it to go. The locals came out with whatever tools, diggers, and they fixed it well and truly.
Kate talks about changes and upgrades that were made to the surf club and surrounding land to better prepare the facility for weather events, accessing government and local council relief funds and grants, and dealing with FENZ and Auckland emergency management.
It quite quickly, to me, became obvious that there is no such thing as Auckland emergency management. The amount of times that you heard, okay, all right, I'll escalate that. It's like, where are you escalating it to? I mean, Wayne Brown came out and he was just like, why the fuck would you live under a cliff anyway? You know, like, they were just awful.
We discussed providing accommodation at the facility, the food store and op shop set up at the club after the cyclone, exemptions for paying guests to the surf club, support from other organisations and local businesses, feedback from the community.
You know, the hardest one to hear, which you hear in, back chat around the community, is that the surf club was unprepared. And what we do really well at the surf club is save lives in the water. Primary role. That's always been a little bit hurtful.
And Kate shares the effects of the cyclone on commercial bookings and the financial stability of the surf club.
Hi, my name is Kate Ward. Our young family, moved out here 22 years ago. We bought 2.5 acres in Waimauku, 8 kilometres up the road from Muriwai Beach, which was where my sister lived with her young family. And why we came out here with our 2 dogs for a lifestyle, we immediately signed the kids up for nippers. So we've been involved with surf lifesaving ever since then. And slowly but surely we got more and more entrenched in the surf club committee and roles within that. And then fast forward to about 2017, I actually took on the paid role at the surf club as sort of facility manager, bookings really, and then the administrator of the Volunteer Lifeguard Service and the Lifeguard Service Amenities Trust, which is the facility. My husband, Nate, is a trustee of the facility, which is how I got roped in. So they look after the building itself, and the Volunteer Lifeguard Service is the prominent tenant within the facility. So they live there. It's 13 years old now, so it's pretty gorgeous facility for surf clubs. You know, a lot of people say it's the nicest surf club in New Zealand, so it's a pretty cool place to operate from.
The surf club is like partly sort of like 51% surf lifesaving and 49% community, is that right?
Yeah, we We got a loan from Auckland Council on the premise that it could be used for community use. There are other user groups that are part of it. Māori Bay Board Riders, Muriwai Sport Fishing Club, the Playgroup's part of it, the Environmental Community Trust to do the nursery, and also the Muriwai Community Association has, involvement there. That's probably the extent of community use that's official. But as a principle, if you are organising a community event that's free, then there is no charge to use the facility. So that's where we draw the difference. Is if somebody wants to have there's an big orienteering group that have their meet there, they pay per person for the use of it just comes down to toilet paper, electricity. We have to cover our costs because that's our only way of, generating any income.
And people can rent it for weddings and that kind of thing.
Yep, it's available for external hire for private functions.
You live in Waimauku, so you're sort of out of the major disaster zone when the cyclone hit. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were expecting personally before the event, and then also what you were thinking about for preparing the surf club?
Okay, so as you know, living rurally with weather events coming, you are always slightly concerned about power. We often have power cuts, and personally at our house we have a generator. So we had been down south to a wedding and it was starting to get pretty stormy. We got our personal generator out, and we are always conscious that the surf club didn't have a generator. So in long-term power outages, over the years, we have brought them in to keep things running, water, etc. But it was, the sun was going down on this, was it Monday, Sunday?
Monday.
So we didn't have a generator organised for the surf club. And it was getting pretty stormy. It was kind of bedtime, and that was basically, I sort of can't remember any other planning when my phone rang, and it was my good friend Rebecca Muir, whose sister-in-law's house had just collapsed. Well, they were flooding. They are a domain. Obviously, Hina and Eddie's house is Mototara, and they were the first call. Hannah's brother Seth and Bex, his wife. We're flooding, Eddie's digging, it's out of control, and they went, well, come on up. And that by that stage, they were out of their house, running down over sort of mud with their two little boys. Eddie had fallen off a retaining wall. Bex is a nurse, so she was kind of, first dealing with that kind of thing. She was busily directed to go down to the surf club, promptly, while they were getting everyone out of the houses up there. And she rang me because neither of us had clicked that it was a power cut and the gate wasn't working. She rang me to get the gate code for the regional park, knowing that I work there and I would know it.
Can you tell us about that gate? Like, what is it?
It's an electric gate, and it has, after when the regional park closes, so it's later in the summer, earlier in the winter, it locks. The bar comes across and you can't enter the regional park without a code. And obviously in a power cut. So I was busy telling her the code and she was punching it in using her phone as a torch, and then we both clicked, there's a power cut. There is no power. So I rang Van, the park ranger. He just lives up towards Parakai, and he was like, there's a tree over my drive. I would come and help, but I can't. get out, and I said, how do we open the gate? And he said, smash it. So there's a green power box on the right-hand end that locks it. So get back to the others down at the gate and say, right, get something, a hammer, I don't know, something, smash that, power thing off and the gate will release. And I think by that stage, Emma Carroll might have arrived with something heavy. I'm on the phone from, 8Ks down the road. So it was all a bit blurry, but they got in. And it was starting to flood. There were lifeguards in the surf club. They were launching an IRB, kind of trying to get people through the water. So the whole front of the surf club was basically underwater. And Bex kind of kept in contact over the next few hours, but I think the last, or maybe that was when I woke up, I got a text, or I was reading her text that said, they're evacuating us to Waimauku War Memorial Hall, and then apparently onto the Trust Stadium, help. And so I think that was about 6 a.m, maybe. And so I just threw some clothes on, jumped in my truck and went down to the War Memorial Hall. And in my Land Rover Discovery, I got 2 families of 4, a single woman, 2 dogs and a cat and myself. And it was like people smuggling. That's what it felt like. They were sort of, escaping out of the evacuation centre. And we drove back up to our house. And we're at the top of a hill. There was, no flooding to deal with.
And just back to that gate, has anything been done since, to kind of mitigate those problems if an event like that happened again, that you couldn't actually get through the gate?
No, that would be a question for regional parks because it's their gate.
Yeah. So I was just wondering if you knew that regional parks had actually done anything about that.
No, and I do think at the time there was sort of a suggestion that maybe it could be on a solar, but then that would need battery power to store it. I don't know. No, I don't know what they've done about that, and whether there's now, something like a release button or a, no, I don't know. Yeah, because it's the regional parks asset or, expense. It's nothing to do with us.
The surf club, it had been kind of labelled as the community kind of emergency place to go. Is that right? Well,
yeah, more discussion happened about that afterwards because obviously there's in this coastal area, tsunami is, and we're definitely not the place to go in the event of a tsunami. So, we get evacuated in the, tsunami warning. So us, the golf club, kind of shared that facilities available for shelter.
And you hadn't ever actually talked as a club through the possibility of an emergency or a weather event like that and what the plan would be?
No, although if there was an unlimited budget, we would have had all the things we have now there. But, generators are $50,000 for a facility like that. Starlink, all the things that we now have in place, upgrading the water system so that you could drink the water in whatever event, because that did happen. Our water got contaminated. So all those relief funds that we have accessed since have got it to a place now that it automatically has generator comes on. It's all, we've got enough Starlink for the community to use. So if cell phone coverage goes down, because that was the other thing that happened during that night, is there was no cell phone coverage. So the communications all stopped. And you're like sitting there in the darkness going, I hope they're all right, which they weren't. They were flooding up to their, over their ankles, and, there was animals, people, children, old people, which is why the army it had to be called
Came
in.
in.
My husband, Nate, was the chairman of the volunteer lifeguard service at the time and a trustee. So his phone started ringing and there was media and, all sorts. And they were saying, asking questions, do you know anything about the house that's collapsed? And he was, it was almost humorous because they were in our living room. And he was going, no, there's no information. We don't know anything about that. But that is probably when it really became about Dave and Craig for us, because Hannah and Eddie are sitting on the sofa freaking out, reading text, getting information, and it was slowly dawning on them that they might not have survived, that they couldn't find him, yes, people have evacuated, yes, people were out of their homes, but it really became for us about the two, Dave and Craig missing, and, who knows whether they were alive. And so you could just see them, the blood draining from their faces when they got any text come through. Because not only were they, they came to their kind of rescue, but they were all friends. They all had peer groups. Kids were all the same age. They were, close to both those families. So, I don't know. It just seemed to go one thing after another. Charlie's boss.
That's Charlie Ward, Kate's son, and Luke Nabarro from Alpha Electrical.
Rang Charlie because Seth's car was stuck down at the surf club and they needed to get Hannah and Eddie to their parents' place. And so I rang Charlie, and his gorgeous Luke let Charlie come and get Seth in his Charlie's big four-wheel drive, and they ploughed through the flood water, got Seth's four-wheel drive. While they were doing that, Luke had said to Charlie, tell Hannah and Eddie they can have my rental. It's now vacant, so, which is up on the top in Costa. So it was sort of 10 o'clock, and felt like a big wraparound of this family, because it's like, right, well, you're going to have somewhere to stay. You have nothing. But yeah, Seth basically bundled them up. They needed to get Eddie's head seen to, and then get them to Seth and Hannah's parents' place to be looked after. The next wave of displaced people arrived, which was when Jane and her family arrived.
That's Jane McCall and Ian McCarroll and their two girls, Vegas and Jet.
The full flooding, surf club flooding, being up all night, it was all becoming, all the stories were coming out. More dogs arrived. I think we had 7 in the end for a few weeks. But Bex and Seth seemed to be kind of sorted. They went to their parents, but then they still had a school, they still had Theo who was, trying to maintain some kind of, so they ended up with a camper van and they parked it out the front of our house and kind of came and went a bit, trying to be a bit independent, but it was, then that broke down. There was one thing after another. So there, for a while there was Jane and Ian and their girls, and Bex and Seth and their two. And then for me, the emergency network meetings started. Basically, weirdly, I'd taken a delivery of a whole lot of toilet paper. Oh, the clean-up at the surf club was obviously the first thing. That was probably Wednesday, and we got down and there was an amazing turnout. There was, 20 people there. Everyone's moving furniture, mopping, getting rid of all the, flooded stuff. And so I arrived with all the toilet paper that was sitting in my garage, fortunately, because everything else that was in the surf club was ruined. And we began to, bring it all back, but quite quickly realised that something needed to be done around the perimeter of the building because it would just flood again. And I think there was a little bit more of a forecast then that there was more rain coming. And so a little bit of remedial work was done, but then it flooded again whenever that next rain came. And
Had you ever had flooding before?
no, never.
So it was just, it was, the rain was like we'd never seen.
Yeah, the rain like we'd never seen, and I've always thought, and I think I've kind of run this by, Nate's the engineer, not me, but I think there was, the water supply had gone into the earth, so it was just running down towards the surf club from all over Muriwai. The water care, up above the houses over there. So it was just a phenomenal amount of water. And where was it coming from? Not just the sky and not just Awaya Road. It was coming from all over. It was like it was just, the ground was saturated and there was nowhere for it to go. So anyway, that time, I think that was a Friday afternoon, all the locals came out with whatever tools, diggers, and they fixed it well and truly for good.
How did you make the call out to get that kind of support?
I can't remember. I usually, when somebody calls me, first thing I do is call Nate. I think we've got flooding happening again, and it just very quickly. There is quite a few local lifeguards that are plumbers, and Brian Chapman, who's got their house up there. I think he's got his own digger. It's amazing what comes out of those long driveways. The community page, texting, and just everyone congregated down there, and prevented it being as bad. It was still inside, and so a whole lot more mopping and a whole lot more tidying up, but we had lifted quite, it wasn't quite as bad as the first one because everything was up and over, but And
then once you've done the cleanup, what happened then?
This comes back to the people as well. So whilst all of this displaced residents and all of that's happening, there is a very tragic organisation of, first of all, the funerals. And so, FENZ was very much the first organisation kind of that we were dealing with. So, first of all, I was dealing with national level FENZ, or the regional, who said, we are going to send in, what are they called? Brigades from all over the region to give the Muriwai brigade a break for grief and, relief. And so they booked in with the surf club, and we had them living upstairs, and a new truck would come every day, and they'd change out. And they were the first organisation that we had anything to do with, really, that was sort of onto it. They booked them, we knew who they were, how many was coming, and they stayed at the surf club. It quite quickly, to me, became obvious that there is no such thing as Auckland emergency management. It's like a folder that various people's names, or they get passed around. We got the first guy, and he was great, and he came to the meetings, and he was like, right, what do we need to do? Blah, blah, blah. Within 10 days he was gone. It wasn't his actual job. And so you sort of thought, and he was a really, kind of looked like an ex-army, capable looking guy, and you're like, phew, this guy's going to organise everything and get it all sorted. And they were all only there for sort of 1 to 2 weeks and then gone again. And it was like basically being plucked from various council jobs and said, right, you're going to be based at Muriwai for the next 2 weeks. And they didn't know. It was chaos.
Yeah, and then you can't sort of get any momentum.
No.
Or consolidation, or, and building relationships. And it's like every person has to start again.
Yeah, and also they had because it's not an actual role, they had no ability to make anything happen. I mean, the amount of times that you heard, okay, all right, I'll escalate that. It's like, where are you escalating it to? Like, who? I mean, Wayne Brown came out and he was just like, why the fuck would you live under a cliff anyway? They were just awful. And and they're not their fault. Like the regional park, obviously, Scott, who everybody had so much to do with, trying as hard as they can to, do what they can, but nobody really had any power. So yeah, that's going on the side, and then the FENZ locally, they wanted to be in charge of the funerals, and so that for me, that was one of the most trickiest things, because it was just so because I would have their families contacting me or their friends saying we'd like to have something at the surf club, and you're sitting in a meeting with Phelan, he's going, I don't even know who the fuck that guy is. No, we are organising that, and it was like it became a real power struggle of who's, but I think both Amy and Lucy sort of surrendered, and it was like, okay, let FENZ do what they need to do, and they, organised 2 really beautiful services up at Pareora. But so that was sort of one of the things in the first few weeks, and then those meetings became daily, and so a small little 20-hour-a-week part-time job was full-time.
Do you think in your role as administrator you kind of go above and beyond, or is that what you see as the role?
I definitely have a wider vision of what happens at the surf club and how it operates than, say, the lifeguards do, or the even individual trustees, because they don't kind of have the day-to-day both sides of the, who's the tenant, who's got something booked. So I felt that I definitely needed a seat at those meetings, because decisions were being made about the facility by people that had nothing to do with the facility, So I remember when it started raining again, because the council or Auckland Emergency Management set themselves up in easy ups at the park ranges, and they had water around their ankles. It was so inadequate, and there weren't even portacoms lifted in, or it was just a couple of little tents. Maybe they thought they'd be here for a week or so, but it didn't seem to be very well thought out. And all of a sudden they were relocating to the surf club, and it was like, okay, hang on a second, you are Auckland Council. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, you need to hire this facility, because it can't be used for anything else while you're here. People that were trying to help all the residents and the displaced people, had their table in their little area within the classroom. It was the bathrooms, the kitchen, and like I said before, electricity, toilet paper. Nobody pays for that. So I remember they were there for some time. That was aside. Meanwhile, the free shops being set up, and which was fantastic. That's all community. That's all the people, Probably the biggest regret was the op shop upstairs, because that just grew and grew and grew, and that's something that could have been done off-site, because people did have cars. I mean, the odd person lost their car, but people were coming and going. We weren't cut off like, people in some areas of where the cyclone hit. So, yeah, that was the thing that got out of hand a bit, and it was like, hang on a second, people just arriving with bootloads and bootloads of, hand-me-downs and bits and bobs, and that should have been done in a hall somewhere else.
And that was taking your dormitories, all
the
beds.
Sleeping accommodation and all the kind of the space, and I also think not everybody wanted to come and rummage through what was available. If it had been slightly more anonymous, slightly out of the area, people might have been like, do you know what? I don't actually have any track pants. I wouldn't mind going and having a look. And, and it was, So that in hindsight, that was the hardest thing to get rid of, and it made the biggest impact on the facility, that op shop. But the free shop was amazing. Everybody who operated it Fridges arrived, catered meals. We used our chiller. That, I think, worked really well, and that was easy, really, and that was nothing to do with Auckland Emergency Management. That was the people. Yeah.
And then obviously at that time you weren't getting bookings for weddings or anything like that, so you could use the kitchen facility if you had to.
Well, absolutely. Not only were we not getting any bookings, we weren't allowed them because it became a residents-only area, right, with the road. So anything that was booked had to be cancelled, and we did have quite a few, bookings that were coming up, being the end of summer, and so all our external hire revenue was just, evaporated. The golf club were the first ones to get in and say, we need exemption to get people through the cordon. And we didn't try for a while, but once it all settled down, I did get an exemption for a Rotary group, which is a huge chunk of our annual revenue. They bring 30-odd kids young adults for a youth leadership camp every year, and they were so respectful, and they took them to sand dunes for breakfast, and, they made so the council... But I had to formally get approval for that, exemption to come through the cordon. Slowly but surely things became more email-based rather than the daily get-togethers. But they went on for a while.
Kate's referring to the emergency response group.
1 to 2 hours, either at the golf club or the surf club. Just the various accommodation, all the various aspects that needed to be set up. And obviously, primarily the accommodation, it wasn't something that started straight away because people were at friends' houses. That it became apparent, well, hang on a minute, we're going to need somewhere to live long term because, they're not letting us back in anytime soon. So, yeah, that was the sort of the second wave, really, I think.
So families would come and stay at the surf club?
Sometimes, yep. We made it an option, but we don't, it's BYO everything. So it wasn't actually ideal for a displaced family because it was like, well, actually there's no pillows, there's no duvets, there's no blankets, there's no towels. But people were definitely showering and using the facilities. They were able to work. I mean, the FENZ groups had half the accommodation maybe for a few weeks. And then the rest of the bunk rooms, well, like I said, slowly filled up with...
the op shop.
Yeah.
Yeah. And were you getting any other outside help or support for what was happening at the surf club?
No, only our committee, but everybody is set for me as a volunteer. So, Alpha Electrical were amazing. Our IT guy, Anthony O'Meara, he was incredible. He got all sorts of things sorted. We were kind of leaving the council to it, but in the background, I was slowly but surely adding up the external hire, and when I sent the invoice, they didn't stay much longer after that.
Really?
They were like, right, we'll retreat.
And they paid it, no worries?
They did pay it, yep. And it was, if anybody wanted to go and set up that kind of an operation in a privately owned facility, it's, who's paying?
Yeah.
So, it was. And by this stage, too, Red Cross had come out of the woodwork and said, right, we'd like to help. I mean, I had found myself in the most hilarious situations. All of Red Cross in their fancy uniforms arrive. I don't know how many were there, and they were trying to help. They were like, right, can we just have an on-site health and safety briefing? And I was like, don't really have one of those procedures. That's the cliff. That road's closed, you can't go up there, the toilets are over there, and then all these serious people would be looking at me going, okay, any hazards? Yeah, the cliff.
Oh my
That's a big
God.
hazard. On the flood water, don't go in there. We don't know what that is. Hasn't been tested. The really big one that it took a few months to get it, but was the grant from MPI to buy the generator. And I think once those things started, coming, everyone sort of chilled out a bit.
And did you have to fill in some sort of application form for that?
Yeah,
funding?
grant application it was from Ministry of Primary Industries, disaster relief fund, something. And I mean, there was another one we got from the Department of Internal Affairs, and that was the Starlink. So they're all government disaster funds that you do have to, find. They don't come knocking on your door.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing, I think, because every community needs someone like you who actually works out, okay, how do I find this place? Who's the person I need to speak to?
Yeah.
What do I need to fill out? Fill it in, send it off, and
Yeah.
that's it. You just need people who can take those kind of initiatives.
Yeah, and I think for me too, not living here helped. I mean, this is a terrible thing to say, but I loved driving up Waitea at the end of every day. It was just like, it was quite suppressed,
Heavy.
everything. Every time you turn around and look at somebody, they're like got a look about something, and it's like, right, okay, yes, we can get that, yes, we can get that. And so driving out and, being able to sort of be elsewhere and do that paperwork and submit that stuff was really important
Yeah, I can
for
imagine.
my, mental health.
Yeah, totally. So speaking of mental health, how did the experience affect you emotionally?
I think I'm one of those people that being busy helps, and so having a job, a role, made me feel better. Not quite so serious about it, because it's like, right, I know what I've got to do. We need more toilet paper, being practical. So, yeah, there was a lot of coordination, logistics, picking up donations, finding somewhere to put them. A lot of my friends' businesses wanted to help. So, coordinating with them, with the Hallertau meals and it was we also had a couple of social things with the paddle out for Craig and Dave. I think it was a combined thing. So, it was like, right, well, we put on a free barbecue and we put on but being busy was how I kept.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's more secondhand for me. Like I feel it, I think it was not long after. I think they were still displaced because Vegas was staying in and about our house and, and around, and had literally a panic attack in the next storm. And, which she wasn't the only one. Lot of people running around like, and driving out and calling me, right, I'm coming to your place.
Yeah, I had Nikki and Kenton ring me up. I think on just one of the rains afterwards, a while after. It was like, can you come up here and stay the night? I'm like, I'm fine, we're fine. No, we really want you to come up and stay. Like, we have a room for you and we've made the bed. We want you up here.
Yeah.
Like, we will not sleep if you're still down the bottom. Not that we were at risk of anything.
No.
But just, I think for comfort for everybody, just making sure all the friends were okay.
Yeah.
It was a funny time.
It was a funny time. I know, I was just remembering something then. Remember, it was all about sandbags for a while there.
Yeah.
And, you're just trying to get the council or someone to, and like 4 months later, they're still on the stacks of the shelves at the surf club. That they arrived, and it's like, they're empty.
Really?
Just sacks. I was like, cool, they're really useful, thanks. And like getting the calls from the council. See somewhere where we could put our sandbags? And it's like, I don't know. It just seemed to be nobody was prepared.
Are there impacts of the cyclone event that people might not understand, or are there sort of negative impacts that have come out of that experience?
Yeah, the one, the hardest one to hear, which you hear in, back chat around the community, is that the surf club was unprepared. And what we do really well at the surf club is save lives in the water. Primary role. That's always been a little bit hurtful because we weren't prepared. But we are well and truly now established with reliable supply systems, water supply. Sorry, our water's been completely had a makeover. We've got a generator. The SARA squad is fully equipped to with Starlink, and that's going to be huge with the communications if another event is. So the surf club's now way more resourced for an emergency. But what we found helpful at the time or in the recovery were the doers, not the talkers. So you just had to sort of block, out that. The one thing that was really good was the non-perishable donations. So, that car seats, high chairs, dog beds, all of those things would come and go like that because people were literally trying to recreate their homes. I mean, do you remember they couldn't get in, the freezers were rotting and just all of that stuff was, it was logistically a little bit of a, we had to have crews and, to receive the goods, to stash the goods, but those people were great. And then the hardest part was probably the friends and loved ones being displaced. I'm getting emotional. And then the other thing for the surf club is watching people leave. So, yeah, it feels different, doesn't it?
What do you think the Muriwai community did really well?
Well, my daughter gave me a saying, and I'm very early in my Te journey. I was explaining to her in English what I thought it did, and she said, this is a very famous Māori saying. He aha te mea nui o te ao. Hei tangata, hei tangata, hei tangata. Yeah. So, yeah. The learned about yourself. I'm actually quite good in a crisis. Lol. Famous old saying that my father brought me up with is when the going gets tough, the tough get going. But for me, I was in a privileged position. I was high on a hill and safe. So, welcoming people into my home was easy. Commercially, the avoid Muriwai messages really affected us. The phone stopped ringing, the email inquiries stopped, and I don't often listen to commercial radio, but I remember turning it on and, the messages were leave them alone. They're in recovery mode. It's like, oh,
yeah,
we wouldn't mind the odd booking, like that. That's been hard to get the momentum back up of corporates because we, have in the past had quite good revenue from corporate workshops and things. But that message in wider Auckland was, leave the West Coast beaches alone. It has definitely commercially affected us.
And do you feel 3 years on that's starting to improve?
I don't think everyone's forgotten yet. Weirdly, the predominant bookings we've had in the last 2 years since the cyclone is search and rescue, workshops and trainings and Ministry of Primary Industries trainings and, fisheries. So, the people that are relevant to the regional park in the area, not a lot of other commercial, certainly not really any corporate
And what about the weddings? Have they dropped off?
Got 2 in the next 2 weeks. First 2 for ages. So I think we actually cancelled 4 after the cyclone. And that's coming off the back of COVID as well. So yeah, it's been long. It hasn't been a great 5 years for the surf club in that respect, because we had to cancel a lot of stuff.
So financially, what happens if you're sort of struggling or your pots are a bit empty?
Yeah, we've never been, with the predominant tenant being the volunteer lifeguard service, which is now funded by central government, like an emergency service, like it should always be. That's a good solid permanent tenant for us. But there's a famous saying around these places that said people say you should have more events, you should, and we sort of, to the community, it's like right back at you. You should, there is a facility sitting there, great facility, and people don't really have the energy or the know-how or whatever to put events on. But yeah, it's a great facility, and the art exhibition weekend coinciding with the marathon, it was heaving, and it was so lovely to see. It was lovely weather, bars open, there's food trucks. It was really cool to see, and it could be like that a lot more.
Yeah, it's an amazing facility.
Yeah.
What advice can you give to people in communities or organisations like yours going through an event like this?
Definitely have somebody in charge of funding applications for emergency disaster relief. Pretty much found a few of those out of chance, or talking to people. Having that help to be able to let people use the facility for good things, for community things, but not having the concern about having our bills racking up and who's going to pay them. So yeah, that balance out between the disaster relief. Don't rely on the council. You need to find it within the various agencies that are out there to help, and they are. Red Cross arrived with 48 shovels and all this wheelbarrows and things. It was like, okay, I'm not sure we need all of those, but there are all sorts of divisions of those type of agencies that are there to help you, and you just have to find them.
Yeah. And I wonder if there's a bit of a pack of, like an information pack that could be given to other surf clubs around New Zealand to help them prepare in the case of an event like this, especially if they're a sort of community gathering point.
Yeah, which often they are. The 3 biggies are the water, the electricity, and the communications, and if you've got those things, then you can generally create. The other thing that the army turned around and said, let's just get out of here, and I think a lot of, especially smaller communities, that would be the message. It's like, stop trying to, make this safe. And that's what the army did, that night. I think if I was here and we had no power and things were flooding, going to the surf club now would be a really safe option.
Which is great, and you've achieved so much just to make it like that now. You've done so many things so that it is a place that people can go to safely, knowing that, being confident that it's going to be ready. And, in hindsight, you could see what you weren't organised with, but who would have known? Like, it's a sort of one-off event, and now you're prepared.
That's right. I mean, we've always been incredibly, highly skilled and prepared for someone drowning. We are the centre of lifeguarding excellence. And I mean, that is the ongoing issue with our search and rescue squad as well. It's like, hang on, the emergency services are turning us into any kind of search and rescue. We're marine based. We have jet skis and boats and, swimmers and tubes. Don't call us to a problem
In the forest.
in the forest. And it's a little bit of a under-resourced area, I think, emergency services, and it certainly is in the Auckland Council. I mean, you're probably better off in a smaller community where there's a civil defence, because they've had to create a pack and create a person with it, and it's like Auckland doesn't really have that. The city's too big.
And is there something hopeful or meaningful you'd like to leave us with?
We were not only dealing with a natural disaster, we were dealing with the death of the, 2 community members and fire brigade officers. So that, I think, made it so much darker and so much harder. The people around this area, if you just pick up the phone and ask anybody for anything, they would do it, and I think we all experienced that.
Precipice was commissioned and funded by Muriwai Community Association, supported by the Auckland Council Recovery Office. Artwork by Taylor Williams, soundtrack by local Muriwai band Tin People, written in response to Cyclone Gabrielle. Ngā mihi, thank you to the Muriwai community for their input and bravery and for sharing their stories. And thank you for listening.